Hi everyone, it's Elizabeth here. So today I just wanted to do this video in regards to the psychology behind sugar addiction. So working as a trainer and a health coach throughout, since 2006, so we're talking almost 13 years, I've noticed that there definitely is a trend between people's life situations and sugar addictions. So here's the thing, sugar is just as addictive as any sort of substance like cocaine, drugs, heroin, alcohol. That is not, everybody's heard about that. It lights up kind of the same receptors and areas of the brain as hard substances do. And the same thing, people who are sex addicts generally are sugar addicts as well, because it's all lighting up the same area of the brain and releasing certain types of chemicals. But the one thing I've noticed, people can easily become a sugar addict in today's society, especially in America, because most of our food, especially fast food, is laden with sugar and salt. Kind of the two go together. I mean, there's a reason why people love chocolate covered pretzels. It's because it's like you're getting that combination of sweet and savory to hit the tongue, which those tastes, stimulate the brain to release certain types of hormonal flow. So a lot of people don't really understand that the root cause to a lot of things in the human body is because of our glandular system and the type of hormones that are released during certain things in life. So there is a reason. In other videos, I've talked about how we're emotional high addicts nowadays. It's like social media and all these different things are hitting our brains, and so we're getting these little hits of hormones that are making us high, or you get like a runner's high when you're doing long distance running or hiking and things like that. So what I've noticed as a coach through the years is that most people who have a sugar addiction, if it's not coming based from just a physiological need of having a sweet tooth and just liking sweeter stuff, a lot of people are suffering inside. Either they have some form of a lack of spiritual fulfillment in their life, or they're trying to fill a void and a need. And usually this is coming through some form of comfort and love. When you start peeling back the onion layers of people's lives, you tend to notice that there's a lot of unresolved issues, whether that's through, wounds from certain relationships, or it could even root back to childhood wounds, or just certain things that are like abandonment problems that come from, our parents. One person that I personal trained for a long time, it took me about 3 years, but I finally discovered her sugar addiction was rooted to her father leaving the family. And so that caused a lot of issues in her life in terms of dating and relationships, either not finding a person or not finding like the right type of guy. And there was a lot of addictive type of behaviors to kind of cope with that pain through emotionally eating a lot of sugar. And it was very, very difficult to get this person to choose more natural types of sugar and things like that. So if people start to understand how the human body works, I feel that they can help navigate their lives a little bit easier, in addition to being able to understand when they're making certain lifestyle choices, because it's rooted to a certain problem in their life. So for example, somebody who is, if somebody breaks up with them, do they go on these binges of these, do they go on a sugar binge? That's what I'm trying to say. Every time their boss yells at them, do they immediately go home and eat a bunch of ice cream because they're trying to cope those emotions through the sweetness of the food to get a better hormonal release because they've had such a crummy day because of their boss at work? So I've made some notes here that I'm going to read that you can start to understand how sugar affects the body and kind of the psychology that's behind it. So eating sugar increases the serotonin levels in the body, which is a calming and mood elevating neurotransmitter. Serotonin plays an important part in regulating pain levels and sleep cycles, and is an antidepressant as well. So when sugar levels increase, serotonin levels rise, and individuals can feel better about themselves both physically and mentally. Many times we think of things like cookies and ice cream and other sweet foods like cakes as comfort foods. So this could be one of the reasons why many people have a hard time staying away from these sweet type of foods. So ingesting sugar can also increase dopamine levels. Research has proven that addictive substances like cocaine and heroin cause elevated extracellular dopamine levels in the nucleus accumbens. Sorry, don't know how to say that word. This same process occurs when sugar-rich foods are ingested, and I must state that this is definitely more on the processed base of sugar. So the things that are coming from white sugar, cane sugar, actual sugar cane, and not so much on like the produce. So like things like figs and apples and bananas and stuff. That can still be addictive, but for the most part, people are addicted to the actual like hard substances of, brown sugar and stuff like that. The same process occurs when sugar-rich in foods are ingested, and it also been found that the dopamine receptors are critical for people to experience pleasure for normal life events like watching a movie, exercising, and reading books. A deficiency in this receptor can lead to depression. So many of those who are deficient in the dopamine receptors may turn to drugs or sugar for pleasure and to cope with the pain. A deficiency in the receptor has also been linked to a variety of disorders like alcoholism, binge eating, bulimia, and anorexia. So there was a study that was performed on rats and tested why people have a hard time slowing their sugar intake. And the results showed that dopamine was released when sugar was ingested. So in the study, rats were deprived of food for 12 hours a day. Then when there's normal circadian rhythms, that's your sleep-wake cycle, was normal, they were given a 12-hour access to sugar solution and chow. This resulted in the rats learning how to eat copious amounts of the sugar solution, especially towards the start of the day. After this feeding cycle, the rats showed many behavioral similarities to those who have a drug addiction. For example, binging and opiate-like withdrawal occurred along with signs of depression and anxiety. Each time the rats drank the sugar solution, there was a release in the extracellular dopamine, it's labeled as DA, in the nucleus accumbens, which is the NAC. So this is a typical effect of drug abuse, and over time can lead to changes in the availability of DA receptors. After a carbohydrate-rich meal, one can expect to be sleepy for hours as tryptophan enters the brain and dominates the LNAA, so that's the large neural amino acid. Because sugar is a carbohydrate that is easily broken down in the body, the effects of sugar happen very quickly. This happens because blood glucose levels rise after a carbohydrate-rich meal, which releases the hormone insulin. Researcher stated that as it turns out, all of the amino acids that complete with tryptophan for entry through the LNAA are sensitized to insulin. When this happens, the ordinarily scarce tryptophan becomes the most abundant amino acid in the brain. So intermittent sugar access can also act through the opioids of the brain. The changes in the opioid system of the brain caused by eating sugar lead to addiction-like signs of withdrawal. So intermittent excessive intake of sugar can have dopaminergic, cholinergic, and opioid effects that are similar to psychostimulants and opioids, albeit the magnitude of what they're consumed. So even though the effects of sugar on the neurochemicals are mild, it can lead to a dependency and an addiction over time. So we have to understand that when you're looking at society, especially if you're starting to look at like society as a whole in America, this destruction of Western civilization, the first way you can start to control people is through the food. And there is a reason why our urban planning of our communities are scaled around these big box stores as well as corporate fast food companies. If you look at the ingredient list of a McDonald's burger and a French fries, I think the French fries, I'm going to have to look this up again. I think it has 17 ingredients. which is weird because it should just be like potato, oil, and salt, right? That seems to be like the most basic needs, but there's a bunch of chemicals in it, including, I think there's sugar in it. But if you look at the ingredients list to a McDonald's bun, sugar is within the first three ingredients. Water, flour, sugar. Those are generally the few main things. So when you have a bunch of sugar in the main carbohydrate of the bun on top of eating the savory and salty French fries and getting that fat, this is why all these the fast food industry can be extremely addicting to a lot of people. But when you're looking at things of trying to control people and really destruct their health, like sugar is definitely one of the main ways of going to it, because once you want it, you need more of it. And a lot of people, I've gone to so many fitness and nutrition conferences, and I've heard really wise doctors speak, and they think a lot of the root causes to food addictions are because of loneliness. And loneliness might be the root cause of a lot of stuff. We're lonely, we get in our head, and then we want to feel better about ourselves. So for most people, they're going to reach out to junk food or to sugar, or they might become a shopping addict, or they might become an alcoholic and things like that. So our nation in America is suffering, especially in middle America, where we are so car dependent, that it is easier to go sit in the car and just go through the drive-through. I mean, Starbucks nowadays have drive-throughs. You don't even have to get out of the car to get a cup of coffee. I know a lot of people who I've trained or who have been my former yoga students, who have moved to Seattle, especially from other areas of the country like Kansas or Texas, and they say that their life and health has vastly improved by living in Seattle because you have to walk around everywhere. It's a more dense city. It's really expensive, so you do have to walk to get to and from places. It's not easy to find parking, but also it's just expensive, so it's more economical to take the public transit, where you do have to, if I take public transit from my house to my job, I get off and I have to walk 0.9 miles each way. So it's like I'm getting at least a 2-mile walk in every day, which is a very European type of lifestyle. So when you do go to places like New York City or San Francisco or Portland, you know, a lot of these urban centers, or like Chicago, you tend to find people who are more fit and in shape. And some of this is because they're a little bit more health conscious. Generally, the more educated you are, there is generally a linkage toward being a little more health conscious, in addition to walking as part of your commute on a daily or a weekly basis. But it doesn't matter if somebody's thin or if they're overweight. I mean, I know a bunch of people, especially certain men, have a great metabolism where they could just plow through a bunch of fast food, sugar, candy, chocolate, and alcoholic beverages, and they'll never gain a pound. They're just blessed in that way. But that doesn't mean that they're healthy, because probably their body is suffering and rotting inside, and some of that will catch up with them, especially once they get into their latter or mid part of their years, in their 50s and above. So if you have a sugar addiction, I suggest starting to notice the patterns of when you are reaching out for this food, especially if you're going toward a binge cycle. If you're going to a binge cycle, are you doing these things where you're completely cold turkey for 7 days and then you binge for 5 days and you go cold turkey? That extremism, you're tending to flip-flop from one side of the spectrum to the other. So you're going to have to look at to see how you can try to find some form of moderation and or some mindful eating tactics to where you can really enjoy sugar. Sugar is not a necessary ingredient to have on our, Maslow hierarchies of need. And I know I've been through sugar addictions in my past. And from my own experience, it's because certain things were unstable. It was like my emotional state was unstable, or there was an unstable relationship where it's like I knew it wasn't going to work out, and I just started to reach out toward food to kind of cope with my sadness. In addition to, I've always just had a more sweeter tooth. Like some people love salty. I just like the sweeter things. So I was eating a bunch of like power bars and yogurt and fruit and chocolate and stuff like that. I was never like a candy, Skittles type of person, because I just found all of that to be like empty calories. but things like chocolate, definitely cakes and stuff, I loved. And so look to see when you're doing it. Start to notice your behavior patterns. You can do this by keeping a log or a journal of it. You have to do this from a non-judgmental standpoint. You have to start to notice when you're doing this. Are you going home after a rough day of work and eating a bunch of sugar? So is it your boss that's, your micromanaging boss? Is he contributing to some of this addiction? You can't blame the other person, but you have to notice how you're coping with certain stressful situations in your life. And you have to start kind of peeling back the onion layers. I mean, if somebody was abandoned by their father, if the father left the family, and each time a person is starting to fall in love with a man and they're starting to become an addict to some degree with sugar, they might be coping their emotions with like some fear of abandonment issues, like, scared that this guy might leave them, and stuff like that. So you have to kind of dive deep and dig in to really see what's going on in your own psychology and your own behavior patterns. So these are some thoughts I have. If you want to share your experience or any thoughts that can help with sugar addiction, I hope that this helps you understand that there is a psychological component by it. So some of this is, it's not all about, having like a strong will and things like that. That is necessary, but some of this I think is planned from kind of like a higher demonic power to kind of destroy us, because the first way to destroy people is by destroying their health. And once you destroy their health, you're going to have to get on pharmaceuticals for this. So everything is just this interspiral of this dark, just this darkness that's kind of plaguing the earth. So that's what I'm trying to say, and trying to control us. So if you want to share anything, please comment below. If you'd like, you can subscribe to this channel. You can help me build it. And thank you for liking, sharing, and subscribing. And you can also support me on Patreon. Have a great day. Thank you. Bye.